I moved to Maplewood a few weeks ago. I'm 32, and I thought it would be perfect for my freelance graphic design work. The town looked forgotten, with empty shops and a thick fog that rolled in every evening. I rented an old bungalow at the edge of the woods. It had a certain charm, even if it was a bit run down. On my first night, I set up my workspace and tried to dive into my projects. But then I heard it, this faint tapping on the walls. I thought maybe it was the house settling. I shrugged it off. But as the night wore on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I got up to check. No one was there, just shadows and silence. The tapping returned in the following days. It got louder at times. Sometimes I saw shadows moving outside my windows, but nothing was there when I looked. It was unsettling. I even chatted with a local shopkeeper, and she mentioned something about not being out after dark. I thought it was just a superstition. Surely, I was focusing too hard on the weird sounds. Every night, things grew stranger. I heard whispers outside my door, soft mumblings like a conversation I couldn't hear. My heart raced each time. I often caught the smell of smoke, which felt odd for such a quiet place. The more time passed, the more I felt something was off. One evening, while the fog hung heavier than ever, I saw a figure flicker past my window. My heart jumped. I stepped closer to the glass, but when I looked outside, nothing was there, just trees and darkness. A chill swept over me. I felt like something was watching me. I wondered if I was letting my imagination run wild. I decided I should talk to someone about what was happening. The locals were pretty vague. When I asked about the town's past, I could see fear in their eyes. They changed the subject quickly. I felt like I was digging into things I shouldn't. Then, one night, I heard a knock at my door. I froze. It was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone. The knocking turned frantic. My heart was racing. Did someone really come to see me? I swallowed hard and reached for the doorknob. I felt paralyzed for a moment. I opened the door slowly. There was nobody there, just the empty night. As I stood outside in the cold, I heard a whisper behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned around fast, but nothing was there, just trees silhouetted against the dark sky. The silence was heavy. I felt the weight of hidden eyes on me. Maybe the townsfolk were right about avoiding the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had uncovered something terrible. Each noise, each shadow felt like a warning. I wasn't sure what I had stumbled into, but I felt I needed to leave Maplewood before it consumed me whole. Next day, I resolved to gather more information. I needed to understand this place before it drove me away for good. I stepped outside, intending to visit the local library. It was a small, rustic building that looked like it hadn't been touched by time, just like the rest of Maplewood. As I walked through town, I noticed the same old faces peeking from behind shop windows, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. I caught snippets of whispered conversations as I passed by. The word ghost floated in the air. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. When I reached the library, I was greeted by an elderly librarian who watched me with sharp eyes. I introduced myself and asked about books on the town's history. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We have some local records," she said cautiously, "but not many are checked out these days." I spent the next hour rifling through dusty books and old newspaper clippings. Most of the stories were mundane, town meetings and school picnics. But then I stumbled across an article dated back in the 1950s. It spoke of a fire that had consumed one of the larger homes in town. The family that lived there had mysteriously vanished. The article mentioned strange occurrences in the area since then. It struck me like a lightning bolt. Was this what the locals were scared of? I hurriedly copied down the details, eager for answers. As I left, a chill ran down my spine. The sun began to dip, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. It felt like time was slipping away. I rushed home, the wind picking up, whispering like a warning in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. I turned a few times, half expecting to see someone lurking behind me, but only the trees stood sentinel, their branches swaying ominously. When I reached my bungalow, I quickly locked the door, the weight of the night pressing on my shoulders. I spread out the articles I'd gathered, but my focus was interrupted. The tapping returned, louder this time, echoing off the walls. It felt different, more insistent, as if something was demanding my attention. I jumped up and strode toward the sound, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. I knocked back, half in defiance, half in fear. "What do you want?" I shouted into the silence. The tapping paused for a moment, and then I heard a soft thud, as if something had fallen in the other room. I took a shaky breath and moved toward the sound. I flipped on the lights, illuminating the room. Everything seemed normal. But then I noticed a small object on the floor, a dusty old key. My instinct screamed at me. Where did this come from? What did it open? As I picked it up, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The air felt heavy. That's when I heard it, a faint, "You shouldn't be here." Panic surged through me. I dropped the key and stumbled back, glancing around for something to grasp. I needed to leave, but something felt locked inside me, as if I was meant to stay and uncover the truth. I spent a restless night, tossing and turning as shadows danced in the corners of my mind. The whisper lingered, taunting me, pulling me back to it. By dawn, I felt more exhausted than when I had started. I needed answers, and I was starting to realize that I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. With renewed determination, I decided to seek out Evelyn, the town historian I'd heard about. If anyone could help me, it would be her. I slipped into a worn-out sweater, trying to chase away the chill that clung to my bones, grabbed my notebook, and left the house. The town was eerily quiet. The streets seemed deserted, as if the very air was holding its breath. I found Evelyn's house on the edge of a small hill, surrounded by overgrown weeds and wildflowers. It looked as if it hadn't seen a visitor in years. I hesitated at the door, thinking about the cold whisper from the night before. Still, I knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open. Evelyn stood there, her hair pulled back tightly, eyes glimmering with a mix of curiosity and something darker. "You're the newcomer," she said, her voice low. "I've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" I echoed, taken aback. "Yes, you're digging too deep." Her gaze hardened. "You should leave this town while you still can." "I can't do that." I stepped inside, sensing my resolve. "I need to know what happened here. I found something, an article about a fire and a family that vanished." Evelyn's face fell. "There are things here best left forgotten." She turned away, leading me into a dimly lit sitting room cluttered with stacks of old books and photographs. "Please, Evelyn, I need to know," I pressed, my voice breaking. She sighed, the weight of her memories pressing down on her. "The fire happened decades ago. A family, the Whitakers. After the fire, they were never found, but their spirits lingered, seeking justice for what happened. The town has tried to move on, but it's like a shadow that never fully leaves." Her words sent a chill creeping up my spine. "Why is everyone so scared? What happened to them?" The room felt smaller as she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "It's not just about the fire. There are stories of sightings, strange happenings. No one wants to provoke whatever is left behind." Just as I was about to ask more, the ground shook slightly, rattling the windows. I gasped, and Evelyn grabbed my arm tightly.
We'd better go outside. We rushed to the door, and I blinked against the sudden brightness outside. The ground stopped trembling, but the air was thick with tension. Every house looked
like it had eyes, and I felt watched. What was that? I don't know. Evelyn looked worried, glancing toward the sky. But it's getting worse. That's when I saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the woods, cloaked in shadows. My heart raced, the figure seeming to pulse between the trees. I felt my breath hitch. Evelyn, who is that? She turned ghostly pale. We should go, now. But as we turned to leave, something pulled at me to stay. I had to know. Something deep inside me felt locked to this mystery, and I refused to let it go. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure standing among the trees. A shiver ran down my spine, but my curiosity remained stronger than my fear. "Evelyn, wait," I whispered, pulling away from her grip. "It's dangerous," she hissed, her voice low, urgency etched in every line of her face. Ignoring her plea, I stepped forward, drawn to the shadow as if it was calling my name. My heart pounded in my chest, and the world around me faded into a dull hum. "Who are you?" I called, my voice shaky but firm. The figure didn't move, just stood there, a dark silhouette against the greenery. As I took another step, it seemed to shift, a swirl of mist rising from the ground around it. I felt a strange tugging sensation in my gut, a mix of intrigue and deep-seated dread. But before I could utter another word, a loud crack echoed through the air, like a tree snapping in half. The figure disappeared into the shadows of the woods. I gasped, my pulse racing as I spun around to Evelyn. "Did you see that?" Her eyes darted between the trees and me. "We need to go, now," she repeated, her voice shaking. "No, I can't leave. What if that's one of the Whitakers? What if it can give me answers?" My words tumbled out in a rush. I felt foolish for pushing back against her, but something in me was desperate for a connection to the past. Evelyn looked as if a cloud of fear had settled over her. "You have no idea what you're inviting. Trust me." She was almost pleading now, and her anxiety seeped into my bones, urging me to comply. Yet another rumble echoed beneath us, causing the ground to tremor underfoot. I gripped the doorframe, fighting the urge to bolt. "I won't let fear dictate my choices," I declared, staring into the trees, unwilling to let the mystery slip away. Suddenly, the air changed, sharp and electric. I could hear something faint, a whisper on the breeze. "Help," it called, barely audible but unmistakable. My heart raced at the sound. It felt personal, like it was meant for me. Evelyn shook her head, stepping back, her posture tense. "You're making a mistake. Some voices should remain silent. The Whitakers, they weren't accidents. To uncover the truth is to unearth something that should stay buried." Ignoring her, I pushed through the underbrush toward where the figure had vanished. The trees seemed to close in around me, and the air grew thick with a palpable energy. The whispers intensified. I could feel them brushing against my skin. And then, without warning, a flash of light cut through the shadowy woods, illuminating a clearing ahead. The figure stood again, only this time closer, its outline clearer. I could see the faint glimmer of something in its eyes. Desperation, sorrow, or maybe both. My breath hitching, I took another step forward, but suddenly it vanished again, swallowed by darkness. "Stop!" Evelyn screamed from behind me, rushing forward to grab my arm once more. Panic filled her voice. "We need to go, now!" But it wasn't just fear that kept me rooted to the spot. It was the burning question in my mind. What happens if we don't confront it? At that moment, a distant thunder rolled through the sky, rumbling ominously. My heart raced as I felt the ground shift beneath my feet again. I just hoped whatever was lurking in the shadows would finally reveal itself. The moment I stepped into the clearing, the world around me transformed. The air buzzed, heavy with energy, and I felt as if the very trees were holding their breath along with me.
I had followed the whispers, yet now their source was a blur wrapped in shadows. I was terrified, but there was an insatiable urge to know. "Jade," Evelyn's voice broke through my thoughts. She was close now, frantically scanning the tree line, as if expecting something to leap out at us. "We cannot stay here." "Why?" I shot back, my frustration rising. "What do you know that you're not telling me?" She glanced at me, her eyes wide and wild. "Everything! The Whitakers, they didn't just disappear, they were taken. There are things in these woods that prey on curiosity, things you can't understand." I scoffed and looked back at the spot where the figure had stood. "I need to understand," I whispered, feeling an overwhelming pull, as if the trees were entwining me in their secrets. Just then, a blinding flash erupted overhead, illuminating the clearing with an eerie glow. I squinted against the brightness, my heart racing in my chest. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw the outline of the figure again. "Help!" a voice echoed, sounding right next to my ear this time, and chills ran down my spine. The whisper wrapped around me like a cold hand, freezing me in place. "We need to leave now," Evelyn pleaded again, her voice cracking with fear. She tugged at my arm, but my feet felt glued to the earth. "Please," I fought against her grip, my mind racing. "Do you hear that? It's calling me. I can't just walk away." The ground trembled once more, shifting like quicksand underfoot. Panic spiked in my chest as the clearing darkened, shadows clawing their way back. To reclaim the light, it felt like time itself was bending. I turned toward Evelyn, the desperation in her face mirroring my own turmoil. In that split second, a chilling howl pierced the air, something unnatural that sent a wave of fear crashing down around us. Not just a sound, but a warning. "Look!" I shouted, pointing to a movement at the edge of the woods. Something was shifting through the underbrush, growing closer. My heart raced as it stepped into the light, a silhouette emerging with sharp edges and glowing eyes. "Jade!" Evelyn screamed, and in that instant it charged toward us. I turned to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The thing lunged, glistening teeth bared. But just as I thought it would strike, the world exploded into darkness. My heart dropped as everything vanished around me. I reached out, disoriented, grasping for anything, but there was only emptiness as I fell into an abyss. Then, just as suddenly, I found myself back in the woods, alone, with a feeling of dread creeping into the pit of my stomach. "Evelyn!" I called, my voice barely breaking through the silence. "Where are you?" The only reply was the chilling rustle of leaves, whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. I took a shaky breath, realizing I had to find her. I had to figure out what was happening before it was too late. But as I moved deeper into the darkness, each step heavier than the last, I couldn't shake the rising sense that whatever I was about to uncover was worse than I had ever imagined. I stepped carefully, my heart thudding in my chest like a caged animal. The shadows swirled around me, and every crack of a twig made me jump. "Evelyn!" I called again, desperation creeping into my voice. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. I strained to listen, but all I could hear were the distant murmurings of the forest. I felt the weight of the unseen, something lurking just beyond my sight. Then my foot caught on a root, and I stumbled forward, barely catching myself on a nearby tree. As I regained my balance, I noticed something on the ground. It looked like a charm, a small silver locket half buried in the dirt. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, brushing away the leaves. The locket was warm to the touch, and I could almost feel it humming with energy. My mind raced. This belonged to Evelyn. I was sure of it. How did it end up here? I clasped it tightly, a lifeline to whatever was happening. I heard a rustling again, this time closer. The fear in my chest tightened. I turned, scanning the trees, but there was nothing there. I couldn't stay stagnant. I needed to move. I decided to head toward the last place I had seen Evelyn. Then I noticed a flicker of light in the distance. It flickered like a lantern, steady and inviting. I hesitated, torn,
between the urge to investigate and the urge to turn back. The darkness around me felt alive, almost as if it were urging me to stay away from that light. But every step closer to the light pulled me in deeper. I crept forward, the locket still clutched in my hand. As I drew nearer, I could make out a figure dancing around the light, a silhouette flitting in and out of view. It looked like a person, but shadows twisted around them, making it hard to be certain. "Evelyn?" I called cautiously. The figure paused, and in that moment, I was filled with hope. I moved closer, desperate to close the distance. But as I did, the air shifted, thickening like fog. A chill clawed at my neck, and an overwhelming sense of dread pressed against me. "Jade!" It was her voice, but it sounded distant and warped. "Get away from here!" My pulse quickened. "Evelyn, where are you? I can see you!" The figure swiveled, now fully illuminated by the light. But it wasn't Evelyn. I stood frozen as a twisted, contorted face grinned back at me. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and spots of darkness roiled around it. I stumbled backward, the locket slipping from my grasp and falling to the ground. With a screech, the figure lunged toward me, a rush of shadows trailing behind. Everything happened in an instant as I turned and fled into the woods, adrenaline surging through my veins. Then, without warning, the screams of the forest erupted. The trees groaned as if they were awakening from a long sleep, and branches snapped in an angry wind. I ran blindly, hoping to find an escape. But everywhere I turned felt wrong. The woods twisted and morphed, and I could feel the pulse of something ancient and primal thrumming in the air, pulling at the edges of my sanity. "Evelyn!" I shouted again, my voice cracking. I had to find her. I had to know what was happening before it consumed us both. Just then, I burst through a thick wall of trees and skidded to a stop. My breath caught in my throat. What I saw made my heart drop to my stomach. A clearing lit by a dozen soft orbs hovering just above the ground. A gathering that looked both inviting and menacing. And in the center of that light, I finally saw her. But she wasn't alone. Evelyn stood at the center of the clearing, but it wasn't just her. Around her were more shadowy figures, their forms pulsating in the soft light. They seemed to move in rhythm with the orbs, an eerie dance of shadows that sent chills coursing through me. "Evelyn!" I called again, my voice hoarse. She turned slightly, her expression distant, as if she were in a trance. I stepped forward, heart racing. "What's happening? Are you okay?" But she didn't respond. I could only watch as she turned back to the figures, entranced. They moved closer to her, their hands reaching out as if trying to pull her into their fold. Panic gripped me. I had to intervene, but my feet felt like lead, frozen in fear. I noticed the locket still lying on the ground where I had dropped it. Against the growing chaos around me, I sprinted back to retrieve it. As I bent down, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air thickened with tension, and an unnatural stillness settled, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Evelyn!" I shouted, desperation cutting through my fear. I clutched the locket tightly, my only connection to her sanity. With it, I felt a rush of determination. I couldn't lose her to whatever this was. I scrambled back toward the light. The locket warmed in my palm, and the shadows recoiled. I pushed through the dread clawing at me, forcing myself to take another step closer. "You have to fight them, Evelyn. Come back to me." She blinked, her eyes focusing on me for just a moment before the shadows reached for her again. "Jade, it's beautiful," Evelyn croaked, as if the lights were whispering sweet promises. "You should join us." That ignited a fresh wave of dread. Everything about this felt wrong. "No, this isn't right. You need to come with me," I shouted, panic slicing through my voice. And just like that, the shadows lunged at me. I barely managed to dodge as I pushed forward, grabbing Evelyn's hand. Her skin felt cold, almost lifeless. The figures surrounding us hissed, their voices rising into a deafening cacophony. I yanked her, trying to pull her away from their grasp. Suddenly, everything erupted in chaos. The orbs flickered, swarming like angry fireflies. The ground shook beneath us, and a chilling breeze swept through the clearing, extinguishing the soft light entirely, plunging us into darkness. My heart raced. I strained to see, but all I could feel was Evelyn's hand in mine, cold and unyielding. "Stay close," I urged. I could feel the shadows swirling around us, desperate to reclaim their victim. Then I heard it, whispers, calling my name, a growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You shouldn't have come here." The panic surged in my chest. I couldn't let them take Evelyn. My mind raced, searching for an escape through the encroaching darkness. Just then, a flash of light broke through the gloom, illuminating the clearing again, revealing the figures surrounding us. But they were restless now, thrashing and shifting in agitation. That was when I saw it, a skull-like face looming above the others, its eyes glowing like embers. I froze, dread twisting in my gut. I clenched Evelyn's hand tighter, knowing that this was just the beginning of whatever nightmare was unfolding. I felt the shadows press closer, their movements growing frantic as they surrounded us like a storm. The skull-like face locked its ember gaze on us, and I could see a twisted smile spreading across its hollow features. My breath hitched. I had to think fast. "Evelyn!" I shouted again. I could feel her slipping away. Was she still in there? The pulse of her hand in mine was weak. "Fight it! You're stronger than this!" The shadows recoiled, but not all of them. A few darted toward the glowing face, their whispers rising into a high-pitched wail. It was as if they were trying to communicate with their leader. I could barely focus. There was too much noise, too much impending dread. Then, between the swirling shadows, I caught sight of more figures, the ones released by the wayward light. They looked different, more solid. They shared a commonality. Their faces were marked with fear, their eyes wide and pleading. I realized they were victims, trapped here like Evelyn, and I needed to help them too. "Do you see them?" I asked, my voice strained. "You're not alone, Evelyn. We can all escape." For a moment, her gaze shifted, a flicker of recognition lighting her eyes. It was brief, like a candle barely catching flame. "Jade, I can't." "Just hold on," I yelled, pulling her closer, feeling the coldness seep further into my bones. The harsh cries of the shadows grew louder, drowning out the rational parts of my mind. They wanted her. I could feel their desire like claws at my throat. I remembered the locket, and in a fleeting moment, I thought about what it represented. Our memories, our friendship, everything that wasn't dark. "Please," I cried, clutching it tightly. "Evelyn, I need you to remember. The locket, our laughter, all our dreams. Focus on those." It was as if a light flickered within her, briefly illuminating her face. Her grip on my hand strengthened. The locket. The shadows hesitated, their movements faltering, as if they were hesitant to approach. "Bring her to us," the skull face growled, its voice echoing like thunder. "The light shall be taken." "No!" my voice rang out, unexpected strength flooding through me. I focused all my energy into my grip on Evelyn's hand. "You will not take her." In response, an even more powerful wave of shadows surged forward. I could feel them pulling at me, trying to separate us.
I stumbled back, struggling to keep hold of Evelyn. I couldn't let go. I wouldn't. The skull face leaned down, its glowing eyes fixed solely on me. "You are just a child playing in grown-up games," it hissed. "You will regret this." And suddenly, the clearing erupted in an explosion of light. The orbs turned from flickering to blazing with intensity, illuminating everything around us. The shadows writhed, panicking as the light pushed them back. But it wasn't enough. Then I saw it, a deep crack forming in the ground at the center of the clearing, pulsating with the darkness that oozed around it. Whatever this was, it was breaking apart. I knew I had only moments to act. "Evelyn, we have to go, now!" As the shadows lunged again, I dragged her toward the crack. The light surged and flickered, a sense of urgency filling the air. We either faced the darkness together or succumbed to it entirely. "Stay with me," I shouted, bracing for what was to come. The shadows were relentless, and I could feel their anger building. But I was determined to break this hold, whatever it took. Before I knew it, we reached the edge of the crack. I felt our feet slip. Would we fall into whatever abyss lay beneath? I couldn't think of that now. I could only hope the locket would guide us. With one final pull, I braced myself and leaped. As we soared into the unknown, a shriek resonated behind us, sharp and spine-chilling. "This isn't over," the skull face roared as the shadow surged forward. And then everything went black. I woke, gasping, the air rushing into my lungs like a tidal wave. Panic gripped me as I sat up, looking around. We were no longer in the clearing. Instead, I found myself in a dimly lit room with rough stone walls. A chill ran down my spine. "Evelyn," I called out, desperation thickening my voice. My heart raced as I scanned the area. The shadows had taken us somewhere, but where? The room was empty, save for a few flickering candles casting eerie shadows along the walls. I felt an odd sense of disorientation, like I had just been yanked from one nightmare into another. The last thing I remembered was us jumping into the crack. Now I was alone. "Evelyn!" I shouted again, my voice echoing. A soft whimper broke the silence, drawing my attention to a corner of the room. I rushed over and found Evelyn curled up against the wall, her face pale and eyes closed. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by worry. "Evelyn, please wake up!" I shook her gently. Her eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. "What happened? Where are we?" "I don't know," I admitted, my chest tightening. "We jumped, but the shadows—" The memory of those dark claws reaching for us flooded back, and I shuddered. "We have to get out of here." As we steadied ourselves on our feet, I noticed something strange. The air was thicker here, almost suffocating. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I felt a heavy presence press against my mind, whispering anxiously, urging me to leave. We stepped carefully, our footsteps echoing ominously. I was overwhelmed with a strange sense of urgency, like we were being hunted. I caught sight of a doorway at the far end of the room, its frame draped in shadows as if they were alive. "Let's check that out," I whispered, leading the way. I could feel my heart pounding louder with every step. "Stay close to me," I said to Evelyn, who nodded but looked equally afraid. As we approached the doorway, I noticed markings etched into the stone. They resembled twisted vines, intertwining in a way that made me uneasy. I had seen those shapes in my dreams, dark and twisted. My gut twisted with fear. What is this place? Evelyn leaned closer, tracing the markings with her fingers. "It feels familiar," she murmured, her brow furrowing.
Just then, a grinding noise echoed from behind us, and the door creaked open wider. Shadowy tendrils spilled into the room, reaching toward us with a malevolent hunger. My instincts kicked in. I grabbed Evelyn's hand and began to pull her back, but the shadows moved faster, engulfing the doorway. "Run!" I shouted, and we turned to sprint in the opposite direction. The darkness clawed at our heels, relentless and greedy. I could hear the whispers growing louder, taunting us, echoing our fears. "Jade, what if they follow us?" Evelyn asked, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't answer. All I could think about was getting to safety, away from whichever nightmare this was. That's when I saw it, a flicker of light ahead, illuminating a narrow passageway. "Over there," I pointed, and we bolted toward it, the shadows swirling behind us, enraged and hungry for our fear. As we ran, I could feel the warmth of the light pulling us closer. I had to reach it before it was too late. But what if it led us deeper into the darkness instead? Doubt crept into my mind just as panic surged within me. I didn't have time to think. We were almost there when a loud crack echoed around us and the ground shuddered beneath our feet. I glanced back, but it was too late. The shadows surged forward, bellowing with rage. "Jade, move!" Evelyn screamed as I stumbled, caught off guard. Then everything went dark again, the light swallowed by an overwhelming tide of shadows. What now? I awoke again, breathless and disoriented. The air felt different, fresher, less suffocating, almost as if I'd been released from a lingering nightmare. I blinked rapidly, taking in my surroundings. I was outside, sprawled on the damp earth of the forest floor. The dense trees loomed around me, their branches swaying eerily in the wind, and the fog was lifting, leaving glimmers of early morning light filtering through. "Evelyn!" I shouted, scrambling to my feet. I felt a deep dread clench at my gut as panic surged through me. Where was she? "Jade!" Her voice came from deeper in the woods, faint but unmistakable. I followed the sound, my heart racing, as I fought through branches that seemed to reach for me, trying to hold me back. When I broke through the final line of trees, I found her standing in a small clearing bathed in light. Unlike the previous darkness, this glow felt warm and welcoming. "You found me!" she exclaimed, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and confusion. But before I could reply, a chilling gust of wind howled around us, causing the shadows at the edge of the forest to shift and dance. I glanced back, the dark figures emerging like creeping tendrils from the underbrush, taking their place along the borders of the clearing. They didn't seem threatening at first glance, but bore a presence that weighed heavily in the air. "We're not safe yet," I warned, instinctively stepping closer to Evelyn. I could feel the weight of our shared experiences pressing upon us, everything we'd seen, the terrible darkness we'd escaped, and the unknown lurking just beyond our sight. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small but steady. In her eyes, I saw a flicker of her former self, the playful, confident woman I'd met. I could feel resolve building between us. "We face it together," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The creatures at the edges of the clearing drew nearer, whispering incoherently, their expressions twisted, as if encouraging us to relent, offering us companionship in the shadows. But in those dim figures, I saw the faces of the lost, those who had succumbed to the darkness, ensnared by curiosity like we had been. "You want us to join you," I said, my words heavy with understanding. "But this is a trap. You were all taken." The shadows writhed, growing restless, as if my acknowledgement of their plight had struck a nerve. Their whispers intensified, swirling into a chaotic symphony, the forest seemingly trembling with their collective pasts. I felt terrified, yet a part of me wanted to reach out to them, to understand. "Don't let them in, Jade." Evelyn's urgent voice pulled me back to reality, reminding me of our mission, to survive and reclaim our lives. Then came a powerful throbbing, not just within the ground, but echoing in my chest, an ancient pulse reverberating through the trees. "Look," I pointed, as the light surrounding the clearing began to flicker, responding to the shadows with agitation. "It's shifting. We need to act." I took a deep breath and stepped forward, raising the locket I still clutched tightly in my palm. "This is a reminder of who we are beyond this place," I yelled, desperately channeling my resolve into the object. "The light of our memories. We won't forget." In response, the tendrils of shadows recoiled, as if stung. The intensity of their whispers heightened, roaring like a windstorm, their dark forms swirling violently. I turned to Evelyn, our eyes locking in solidarity. We were stronger together, and this was a fight for our very essence. With a fierce shout, I hurled the locket forward. Instead of falling, it floated into the center of the clearing, glowing with fierce light. The shadows writhed and howled, a cacophony of despair erupting from their depths. I felt the tug of unseen hands attempting to wrench us back, but we held firm, side by side. As the locket blazed brighter, illuminating the entire forest, the shadows buckled. The memories of those trapped within squirmed, and I could swear I saw faint faces inside.
The shimmering haze reaching out for freedom, but the darkness pressed back, struggling violently against the light. "Keep going," Evelyn urged, her voice steady like a beacon amidst the chaos. I poured all of our shared memories, our battles, and our dreams into the light of the locket. It felt like we were merging, creating something stronger than either of us alone. Then a deafening roar erupted, shaking the very earth beneath us. The figures at the edges shrieked, their forms collapsing as if the light were disintegrating their hold. I saw the dark silhouette of the skull-faced entity in the distance, swirling amidst the chaos, its angry eyes brightening. "It's working!" I shouted, an unfamiliar sense of triumph filling me as the ensuing chaos began to clear. But then, just as quickly, I felt a crushing weight drag at my spirit. The connection to their sorrow and darkness sought me out and enveloped me. "No, stay focused!" I fought the sensation, pushing through the roaring shadows that threatened to pull me under. Suddenly, the light expanded, surrounding us like a cocoon. It surged out, brightening the forest, until the shadows were mere wispy formations, unable to hold their ground against the brilliance. I felt the pull of the darkness fading, replaced by an overwhelming sense of liberation and release. "We have to keep pushing," Evelyn cried, determination flooding her voice. Together, we stepped into the light as it swelled, engulfing us in radiant energy. The shadows writhed one last time, their desperate cries echoing against the illumination, piercing my heart but fading into the distance, lost in the vastness of our memories. And suddenly, we were free. We collapsed onto the grass, panting but unbroken, the sun shining warmly overhead. The forest around us felt alive, newly awakened with each breath we took. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes reflecting a mixture of disbelief and understanding. We looked back at the shadows now dissipating in the distance, their forms becoming ghostly echoes against the brightening sky. In that moment, as we stood there in the clearing, I felt lighter, not entirely free from the grip of the past, the stories of those lost, or the whispers still echoing in the wind. But this was a new beginning, a reluctant acceptance of the mysteries that still lingered just beyond the thrum of our lives. "Do you think it's really over?" Evelyn asked softly, her gaze fixed on the shifting shadows that faded into the trees. "I don't know," I replied honestly, the question hanging between us. "But maybe it doesn't matter right now." As we turned to leave the clearing, I couldn't shake the feeling of those lingering whispers, like incomplete sentences or untold stories. I glanced back one last time, knowing our journey was still unfolding, full of questions we might never answer. And as we stepped back into the light, I couldn't help but wonder, what else remained in those shadows, waiting to be discovered?